Hi, my name is Nizan, and today I'll be going through all of the different pathways for you to become a psychologist in Australia. A lot of people don't understand that there's more than one pathway, and I honestly only found out after I started doing my first year undergraduate study here in Melbourne. So let's start. All right, so on the screen here, I have a broad overview of the general pathway to become a psychologist in Australia. Typically, it would involve 6 years worth of studying in an APAC accredited program in psychology. So, APAC is this governing body that accredits sort of psychology programs here in Australia. And this is really important because if your program is not accredited, then you will not be able to progress in the subsequent levels. So we would start off with a bachelor in psychology, social science. There's so many different variations of the program depending on the university that you're at. And that goes before you go into the honors year, which is highly competitive. And typically, you would need to have a weight average mark of 75 or above, depending on the university. But to be, I guess, generally safe, try to aim as high of an 80 just to be competitive. Or at this point in time, um, one of my lecturer when I was doing my undergrad told us that out of 450 of you, you know, in only about maybe 50 to 100 would go into the honors program, and out of that 100, there might only be 50 that would progress into the master's program. So attrition rate is a big thing in psychology. Um, and there's a lot of discussions around this, and probably if you haven't heard it yet, they are trying to revamp the future general pathway, making things a bit shorter because, to be honest, if you're doing 6 years to become a psychologist, some people do med school for 4 to 5 years and they become a doctor. So there's a bit of like a pro and con sort of weighing. So in order for you to get into an honors program is just for 1 year. Often they would weigh your first, second, third year GPA for you to gain entry to the program. Now, an honors year can be a Bachelor of Psychology honors, or it could also be a graduate diploma in psychology. Both are equivalent in a sense. They're both considered as a valid or accredited fourth year program to pursue, a master's in psychology. So, um, I forgot to mention before, the Bachelor in Psychology program would typically last for 3 years. An honors year would be an additional 1 year, and then you have the master's program, which is, it could be a 1 year program or a 2 year program, which I will explain in a minute. All right, so this is the outline of the undergraduate pathways. So there's a few different sort of pathways here that, as you can see on the slides. So the first one would be a 3 year undergraduate program, as I said before. That's just a typical bachelor sequence, and then followed by a science psychology with honors. So it's a package sort of program, but more often than not, there's still an entry requirement for you to then progress to the fourth year of that program. So you need to double check. A 4 year program in psychology does not guarantee you the progression to do a fourth year program. So, in undergraduate programs, you essentially learn about psychology more broadly. So you learn all of the different theories, foundational psychological theories more in depth in second and third year, where you will study psychopathology, interventions, and other relevant sort of humanity sort of subjects. Yeah, I didn't expect psychology to have such a strong like maths component or stats component into it, but it was. And so you would typically do at least 2 units across the 3 years for statistics that covers, basic elements of statistical interpretations, all the way to running a regression or a factor analysis. Um, so that's the bachelor program, and then you progress to the fourth year sequence. So that's more of a program that helps you prepare to become a practitioner. So in the fourth year program, you learn more about ethics, more in-depth counseling approaches, as well as statistics. So fourth year, a big component here is the research program, which lasts for 9 months. So unlike other sort of allied health programs for the psychology honors, it's only up to 9 months. So realistically, it's something that can be quite intense. Personally, I saw when I was in my honors program, a lot of my colleagues or my classmates burnt out halfway through the year because of all the commitments around coursework units as well as the research project that you're working on. Um, so I've been a research supervisor for this particular program, fourth year program for a while. And if you would like to learn more about that, feel free to drop a comment down below and I'll make a separate video of it later on. All right, so that's the undergraduate pathway. You have the bachelor's, you have the honors. Now we get to the more tricky bit. So, as you can see on the slide, there's so many different options. There's so many different pathways. Just to note that the 4+2 internship, so essentially the 4+2 is a program where you only do your bachelor's and honors and you organize your own placements in the community as part of an accredited training pathway to become a psychologist. So this has been retired in June 2022. So as I said before, like I did some community practice that was through this particular pathway. So I started before it ended. And for people who are still doing it, they have up until I think mid 2027 to complete the internship to gain their registration to become a psychologist. So the 5+1 internship refers to, I guess, a mix of what I just mentioned, where you do need to do a master's program, but the master's program will only be for 1 year, in contrast to the other 2-year professional degrees. For this one, you only need to study for 1 more year and then you organize your placements for 1 year with the allocated supervision hours and practice hours that you need to complete. The thing about the 5+1 though, as I said, finding placements can be quite difficult on your own, but also the fact that you need to sit for the National Psychology Exam, or NP for short. Um, for the 5+1, I would say is quite ideal for people who can't afford to actually spend more time studying. And the internship, it will be a paid internship in the community. It has its own challenges, similar to the 4+2 that I've been through. The 5+1 is quite, I guess, feasible in a sense in terms of the financial commitment as well as the time commitment. And then you have the option to do the master's degree. So this one in particular, you have to spend 2 more years doing the master's, where the second year of the master's you will be doing a research project again. Um, just note here, if you've done a PhD before and you're planning to go back and do your master's in psychology degree, you will not get any credit for your PhD, so you will have to run another research project as part of the program just because it's part of the accreditation standards. So the 2 years master's degree differ from the 5+1, which is, if you want to look it up, it's called the Masters of Professional Psychology. So the 2 years masters would have an area of endorsement. So this is where you would hear people applying to the Masters of Clinical Psychology, Organizational Psychology, Educational and Developmental Psychology, and the other sort of schools of psychology, or fields of endorsement, as you would call it. So there's different areas of practice, and it's really important for you to understand which one fits your career goal the best. And I would just say, because it's quite competitive, it will lend you an advantage for you to start tailoring your experience, your professional experience, to the master's program that you want to get into. So, for example, if you are into working with children with developmental issues and you want to get into the Masters of Educational and Developmental Psychology, you might want to focus on doing more volunteer work or even professional work, working with that particular population for you to have more transferable skills that would lend you well in the application process. Um, I can create a separate like video as well on that if you're interested. I'm just talking about how to get in, what sort of what could help you get into the master's program, as it is quite competitive. Just a fun fact, I have been offered a couple of masters, the 2 year master's program, but personally at that point I wasn't ready to go into clinical. And I thought like a PhD would be a nice break before, going into seeing clients and being a clinician. So I declined my offers, but I have gone through all of the process to get into a master's program. That the 2 years masters will lead you into getting an endorsement. So, whatever program you enrolled into, for example, if you did a master's of clinical psychology, that means that you have the ability to go through the registrar program, which is like a further training program for 2 years, to then get the endorsement to be called a clinical psychologist. So that's the 2 years master's pathway. Then you have the combined master's slash PhD. So unlike the 2 years program, you will be completing a PhD as part of this program. The good thing about this though is that it comes with a scholarship, at least partial scholarship for the PhD component. But I know that some universities offer both like the coursework element as well as the PhD under the scholarship. So if you're high achieving and you've you know getting a PhD is part of your goal anyways, this might be a thing that you should consider if to that level. So similar to the 2 years masters, you will have an endorsement area of endorsement by the end of this program. There are some variations about how many hours you need to complete for the registrar program, and then your research project in the second year will kickstart your PhD essentially, and then you'll be working towards gaining all of the placement hours in the program. Some people manage to complete it within their first 2 years. So they have, technically they've completed the training program to become a psychologist in the first 2 years, and then they focus on the PhD in the later 2 years. But the only issue with that is because it's a joint degree, you will have to complete both programs for you to then register as a general psychologist, because your program hasn't been conferred. It's packaged in one, two in one. Moving on, so we got the professional doctorate program, so also known as a DPsych. So a DPsych program is different from a PhD. It has a lower sort of scope for research. The thesis expectation is quite, um, it's not more of a clinical focus into the program. Again, gets you the same area of endorsement as it would for the last two pathways, but there's some variations with the registrar program, and that's primarily it. So all of the different pathways that I've just mentioned will lead to general registration. So just because you've done a master's of clinical psychology does not mean that by the end of the program you get to call yourself a clinical psychologist. Towards the end of the day, all of these programs will lead you to be able to register as a generally registered psychologist. Um, so in order to get that endorsement, again, you need to do the 2 years extended training program in your area of endorsement. That's the main pathway for psychology. Moving on to the next slide, which is the key considerations. So I would just say when I did my undergrad, I didn't expect how much time it would take for me to actually be able to work as a psychologist. Not that I'm working as a psychologist now. I still remember the day like the lecturer sat us down in the lecture hall and said, you have to complete 6 years worth of studying to call yourself a psychologist. And that at that point I was like, look, I've enrolled, I've paid my fees, I'll just have to um, get on with it, like I'll take things one thing at a time. And so the cons of doing psychology for um, I guess as a career would be the time investment involved. As you can see, it's not as simple as it seems. Like a lot of other programs like social work, nursing, you just do your bachelor program and then by the end of the day you graduate and you can practice in whatever like area you're in. Unfortunately, that's not the case for psychology. You do have to complete at least 6 years training and or studying to be working as a psychologist. The second thing is the cost. Obviously, it's quite costly and it will add to your HECS debt if you're a local student. For international students, that's 35 to 40 grand a year times what, at least 3 years for the first 3 years. And the master's program tend to cost a lot more per year just because of the resource taken up by the university, I guess, to run the program. The other thing is the competitiveness is just ridiculous. I know some of my colleagues who did really well in their honors and didn't end up getting an offer to a master's program. Some people would try across multiple years, and that's the typical sort of landscape in this field of study. If you really think that, I don't want to invest that much time, I'm not really that passionate in psychology, then I would strongly suggest you to look at other options, to be honest. But if this is something that you can see yourself working in and it's something that you're passionate in, it's a great course. Honestly, it's amazing how much you learn in this area of study. The pros would be the transferable skills. So a lot of the things you learn apply to pretty much any context, really. We work with people all the time, so no matter where you go, what field of work you end up doing, there will be a lot of overlap with the things that you learn in these programs. The second one would be flexibility in career direction. So with that, you don't have to be a clinician. You can also work in academia. You can teach. You can, um, if you want to work in high school, then you can get a teaching master's and then, teach psychology in a high school level, for example. It is a rewarding field, and it is something that, despite all of the commitment, the time, the money, the sweat, the blood involved. No jokes, no blood involved. Um, when you start working and um, you get to see clients and you see how they progress with their own well-being. Honestly, I can't even describe the feeling that you get from that. It is an amazing, rewarding career, and it's yeah, it's worth getting into if you're really passionate in supporting people with their mental health. Hi everyone. So I have to record the ending of this video on a totally different day, and that explains the new hairstyle and the shirt I'm wearing. The take-home message from this is that there's so many different pathways moving forward. And as competitive as it can get, it's really important for you to keep moving forward if this is something that you are truly passionate about. It's not impossible, you take things one thing at a time. And it's not uncommon for people to actually start doing the program and switch down to part-time if they need to, or even diverge to a more specific niche in psychology as they progress. Again, psychology is really interesting and it's quite applicable to all areas of your life. And what makes a really great clinician would be that you actually understand not just the concepts that are being taught, but also how the nuances on how it's applied in day-to-day life. Um, there's more to it than just learning about Freud or Piaget and stuff like that. So towards the end of the day, if you have a passion to help out people in the community, then this should be one of the other career options you should consider. So if you enjoyed this video and if it gave you some insight into psychology, then I guess I'm doing my job right. And if you have any further questions or if you want me to do a video on any of the other um, like components of psychology in more detail, please drop down a comment below and like and subscribe to this channel.